Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. If our presenters can turn their cameras on now, please. Welcome to this webinar on how NLN can support people living with social anxiety disorder to either get an education and overcome the challenges it presents in day-to-day life. So we decided to host this webinar in response to a significant and noticeable increase in particularly younger people presenting with social anxiety disorder to our services. But just to add that NLN caters for people between the ages of 16 to 65, so it's not just younger people. It provides basically an inclusive space for people to get education and training opportunities with specialist supports involved so people can achieve both personal, vocational and occupational goals. So it's really a safe learning space and a supportive environment where you can be surrounded by people who are living with similar challenges to yourself. So this webinar today is for anyone who has a person in their lives or somebody that they come across in work, or they themselves are struggling with social anxiety and mightn't feel ready for a mainstream education setting. So just broadly, we have three speakers today. First up is a chartered psychologist, Jane Watson, who works with our NLN Centre in Bray. She will talk broadly about what social anxiety is and how NLN can help. And then we have a former NLN student, Ciara Glynn, who's now a peer support worker with the HSC. So she will give her personal testimony, which I think will be really powerful today, and talk about how NLN specifically helped her to overcome the challenges of social anxiety disorder. And then finally, our student recruitment officer, Amanda, who works in our flagship college, Roslin College, will talk through how our centres are different and the workarounds that she and our staff use to support people living with social anxiety to actually enrol and sign up and come and attend the NLN courses, and how this process will differ from a mainstream educational setting. So just there's a large number online today, so people's mics have to be muted and cameras are off, but you'll see a Q&A box down the side there if you have any comments or questions, and then we will hope to deal with them at the end of the session. So we're hoping it'll run to about 40 minutes in total, so we won't keep you too long. And we'll get to the questions at the end, but please feel free to email info@lnn.ie if you have any questions or you want to talk about how to enrol or get somebody that you work with to enrol. So thank you very much for your attention today, and we'll kick off now with our first speaker, Jane Watson.
Thank you, Edel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane Watson, and you're all really welcome here this afternoon. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you. So as Edel said, you've signed up to a webinar on social anxiety and what the supports that NLN can provide. So I'm aware that, in our audience today, there's very different, I suppose, different reasons for coming on. I'm imagining that some of you maybe are concerned yourself, that maybe you are experiencing anxiety. Maybe there is a family member, friend, loved one that you're worried about, that you would just like to get some information and guidance on. So just very briefly, I'm working in the field of mental health for over 25 years. I have many different roles, many different services. And just to add on to what Edel was saying, I have never witnessed such high levels of anxiety amongst young people, but actually people of all ages. So I felt like it's almost like a hot topic at the moment, and it's for very good reasons. So I felt before I start talking about NLN, I wanted to frame it for you, I suppose, to give you a background so that we understand what it is that we're really talking about. So I'm going to look at what is social anxiety. How might we recognize it in somebody? How might you recognize it in somebody in your own life? Possible causes. How is it affecting our daily life? How is it affecting us and our levels of our happiness and our mental health? And then a huge focus is obviously what I'm going to be talking about is what is it that National Learning Network can provide for you, your loved one, somebody you might like to refer to us. Thanks, Stephanie. We might move. So social anxiety affects actually approximately 1 in 8 Irish adults, about 13% of our population at any one time. Most often it occurs during adolescence and early adulthood. Not surprising, really, I suppose, given that adolescence is such a turbulent time and a time full of turmoil in anybody's lifespan. Tends to be more common in women than in men. And I'm asked the next point so often, what made me like this? What has caused this? Because I suppose we as human beings, we have a natural tendency to think that if we can understand what caused something, well, then we can prevent it. And unfortunately, there just isn't a straightforward answer to this question. It seems to be, all research would show that it's as a result of a very complex interaction of your environment and your genes. So I suppose it's going back to the old adage, nature nurture. You will see it running in families, absolutely. Often I will meet somebody, son or a daughter, with high levels of anxiety, with social anxiety, and a parent. There will be a parent, also experiencing anxiety. But it is very hard to, and it's nearly impossible to pinpoint. Was it a gene that was passed down? Or is it that that young person has just been witnessing all that anxious behavior, and that's the role modeling? Environment plays a huge role, no surprises. If there's a huge link now between substance abuse. So if somebody is engaging in any addictions or substance abuse, the chance that their risk of developing any mental health difficulty, but very much anxiety, is a much higher one. If you are living in trauma, if there is abuse, if there is neglect, all of those all together can combine to I suppose that they would lead the person, render them more at risk of developing a disorder such as social anxiety. We will have to mention COVID, the dreaded COVID, but I'll mention it because it is a massive factor in where we are all at today. We thankfully, as would all agree, we're out of the COVID pandemic, thank God, but we are in, and I'm not exaggerating, with what we would describe as an anxiety pandemic. So this, unfortunately, is one of the many fallouts from our COVID pandemic and from our lockdowns. And it's not, and I'm sure most of you have already considered this probably, but if we think about it, we were told for those number of years the world wasn't a safe world. We weren't safe. And that messaging is very damaging after a while. It's very subliminal, but it gets very much into the heart of our consciousness. So what were we told to do? Well, you need to do things to keep safe. You need to wash your hands. You need to avoid people. You need to stay at home, keep your 2 meters apart from people. And when we were then told, actually, the risk is lower, let's reopen society, a large part of people, a large number, were able to make that transition back, and they were able to let go of those safety mechanisms. But unfortunately, a significant cohort of the population couldn't. And it's almost like those safety mechanisms backfired. So the things that we did, which was isolating ourselves and staying in bedrooms and withdrawing from society, they continued. And that's because they just couldn't. It was too hard. And I think if we're all even being honest ourselves, it was a bit difficult. I remember the first time going to a coffee shop or going to a restaurant, which was almost like we forgot what we needed to do. And how did we talk to people? How did we order coffees or food? Because it became very unfamiliar. So as I mentioned earlier, all services at the moment, child and adolescent, adult, older adult services, are all witnessing a record demand in the last 18 months for supports around anxieties and around general mental health difficulties. We also need to mention social media, and I suppose just speak for a minute on this. If we are wondering, why are our young people so anxious? Why can't they go to school, go to the clubs that they used to go to? We have to acknowledge that social media is playing a role, and it's not. And I mean, people of all ages are using social media. But young people, their brains are not fully developed until the age of 24 or 25. I always find that's quite comforting for anybody who's a parent who has teenagers. I find it comforting. It gives me a way to actually try and understand then the irrational behavior I see a lot of at home. But their brains, actually, the frontal lobe cortex for any of us is not fully developed until 24 or 25. So for them, dealing with social media it's extra challenging because they don't have that ability necessarily to look at it in a mature, in a rational way. And what is social media? It is it's the need to present your prettiest self, your fabulous, happy, wonderful self, your hoped for self. And for a lot of young people, that just becomes a constant pressure. So it's not just when they're logging into whatever Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is all the time. So it's, and that obviously is very anxiety inducing. If you don't feel that you look as good, are as happy, have as good clothes, whatever it might be. So that emphasis on performance and what others see is there all the time for our young people. I mean, I suppose it's safe to say society nowadays is very hyper competitive and hyper comparative. So that is absolutely going to have a detrimental effect on young people's mental health. It's almost like they're living through a social experiment because we don't have, I mean, the iPhone baby isn't even 12 years old yet. We don't have long-term studies to definitively say what will the effects of social media have on young people. I think we all have a sense that it's not good, and it's just about trying to help them manage it. But it's just to be aware that's another factor feeding into definitely, because I wouldn't have seen it maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago because you didn't have the pressures of social media. So to try and, again, just to describe it, social anxiety, if somebody is experiencing it, it is a fear, an intense fear of situations that you feel you are being negatively judged in. It is a worry, and then again, I'll use the word intense worry about embarrassing or humiliating yourself, a fear of any interaction with other people, talking to people. And this is all at an extreme level of fear. It's a fear that people will notice you. Often when people come into me and talk about their social anxiety, they actually they want to be invisible. They don't want to be seen. That's almost, so it's that fear that actually people see how I am, what I look like, how I speak, what I talk about. There's a huge fear around if people can see that my hands are shaking, I'm blushing. So the physical symptoms that go along with anxiety, which if any of us have ever experienced anxiety, and most of us will, because anxiety is a very normal emotion. It's just when it's taken to an extreme, it is very damaging. But that feeling of, maybe your breath is going, you're hyperventilating. So there's a huge fear of people observing that. So if you think about, if somebody's experiencing these high levels of anxiety and being so afraid, what would any of us do? What is our natural reaction to that? Would be, I want to run away. So I want to avoid that so that I can get rid of this horrible, horrible fear. So the person experiencing the social anxiety is going to want to avoid doing things or speaking to people. So avoiding places where that's necessary. And that's pretty much everywhere. So that is schools, workplaces. People won't want to go to shops, because people are everywhere. For somebody with social anxiety, they tend to live a huge amount in their heads, and it is a very hard place to be in their heads because they are constantly ruminating, overthinking, analyzing every performance. So even if they said hello to the postman that morning, they could have a half hour taking that apart. How did that sound? That probably sounded stupid. I wasn't happy enough. I wasn't funny in that meeting. So it's the person is always expecting the worst case scenario. It's I performed terribly. So I mean, at this point, I just want to acknowledge that I know that all sounds quite negative, and that is a fairly dark picture, but that is the reality. And there's, it wouldn't be fair, and it certainly wouldn't be fair to people who've experienced social anxiety to paint it in any other way. When it is bad, it is debilitating, it is crippling. It is, their happiness, their whole ability to live a meaningful life in society is so compromised. But I equally want us to just park that a little bit just now and to just, I suppose what I'm now going to focus on, people with social anxiety can live hugely meaningful, fabulous, wonderful, happy lives when they're linked in maybe with the right support service, when they have the right maybe treatments from whoever their caregivers are, if they're in the right education setting, if they have good people in their lives. So that is the take-home message that obviously we all will want you to have at the end of this webinar, that there are ways and there are supports and there are strategies to help somebody live with social anxiety. So what do we do in National Learning Network? And I suppose I wondered about putting this point in because I thought people will think, oh, that's a little bit over the top. But NLN changes lives. And I'm absolutely 100% sure on that, and we do it. So it's a fabulous place to work, I suppose, then to be able, it's a real privilege to work with people in this setting, to be able to watch that happen. Now, how do we do that? What are we doing? I suppose we are looking, our biggest difference to a mainstream education provider or to employment, you know, for somebody who's in a job, is that we're looking at the person in a holistic way. Somebody comes into my centre, I'm in the Bray Centre, and they are interested in applying for a course. So I will sit with them, I will meet them, and it is not just, you know, yeah, do you have your leaving cert or your junior cert? It is so much more than that. I am asking them, how are they, you know, how are they academically, but how are they emotionally, socially? Are they going to school? Do they find groups hard? What way do they learn? What is their home life like? Do they have a mental health team looking after them? So it is that big picture, I suppose, that I get from sitting down with that. It's a fairly comprehensive process, takes time, but it is so worth it, because at the end of that, you then have, well, the applicant, their voice is at the center of it all, because they are letting me know and I'm meeting them where they are at. And it then enables me to sit with the teachers, the instructors that run our programs, and to be able to, you know, we can then make recommendations. What might help Jane? She might need this in the class, or for exams, or for assignments. It is a very step-by-step gradual process. There's absolutely no point in pretending it isn't anything else other than that, and it takes time. And I would imagine Ciara, who'll be talking after me, will also speak about that. I mean, if we had a magic wand, sure, nobody would be at this webinar, and actually, you know, people wouldn't have mental health difficulties. But it's the nature of mental health. It you know, so different to treating somebody with a broken leg. It's always a much more, I suppose, complex thing to treat. So, and to support somebody with. So yes, it absolutely happens, and people recover and people progress, but it is step by step. And I think if I had one of my students in here with me now, they would say, you know, it's very much you know, loads of 5-10 steps forward and maybe 2 back. And that can be a very demoralizing place for them, but it's only a few steps back before they move forward again. So it's just to bear that in mind, because I would imagine some of you are sitting here maybe and thinking, this is not happening for me. We've tried X, Y, and Z, and it still isn't working. So yeah, I wouldn't want to minimize it at all. But it does work. I suppose that's the thing. It does happen, and people can live very well. In NLN, one of our key, most unique, I suppose, points that makes us really well situated to help people with social anxiety is that we operate on the principles of UDL. Universal design of learning. It's best practice when it comes to education, any form of education. Essentially, it removes all barriers to people's learning, because it looks at people in that whole way. So it looks to see, you know, are you a visual learner? Are you practical? Do you learn better orally? Do you work better with your hands? You know, it goes back to, I suppose, our education system, very narrow. If we all think back to maybe our own even leaving cert or school life, you were asked maybe to write an essay or complete a worksheet. But with UDL, not everybody's ability is going to be measured that way, and far from it. So now we can, when you come to NLN, it will be more about, okay, well, do you want, maybe you could, You know, you can make a video, you can compile, create a podcast, create a comic strip. That's how your knowledge will be assessed here, and that's how you will thrive here. Holistic, holistic, holistic. I suppose that's what I'm talking about. Broad assessment of people. We work with multidisciplinary teams. That is what NLN is. So that's hugely beneficial to somebody. We have psychologists in our centres. We have advocacy officers. We have fantastic teaching staff. Resource teachers. So it's that team approach enables you to really work in that holistic way. I suppose as psychologists, we work very much for somebody with social anxiety disorder. Cognitive behavioral therapy, if I'm sure you've heard of it, most of you will heard of it, referred to as CBT. That's like the gold standard of treatment. It shows I suppose, probably it seems to be the most effective treatment for somebody with social anxiety. And we, as psychologists within NLN, operate from that model. So it's very much trying to, you know, I could talk for a day on CBT, but if I was to give it to you in one sentence, it's the principle that it's the thought that leads to the feeling that then leads to the behavior. So if you're thinking negatively about yourself, undoubtedly your feelings are very negative, distressing ones, and then your behaviors are equally going to be very negative. So it's to challenge the negative thinking and then to hopefully see improvements in feelings and emotions. So I work a lot with students in social anxiety in terms of those avoidance behaviors that I spoke about earlier, that they tend to want to do to avoid and to run away, because anxiety essentially is like a bar of soap. If you don't use it, it stays the same. It doesn't, but if you can push through that awful feeling, and they are awful feelings of discomfort and fear, like the bar of soap, if you use it, it gets smaller. And unfortunately, it's the only way, really, and I would imagine that Kira might agree with me when she's speaking to you next. So we have the benefit of the space of psychology here to be able to help somebody develop coping skills and wellness tools, because they're going to leave us. They obviously leave us after maybe it's 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and for life, we're setting them up for whatever their next stage is, be it further education or employment. So everybody has their own toolbox. I know you all sitting out there have whatever tools you have to help you stay well and to manage, but that's what I spend a lot of time on, working with people, trying to get that toolbox. So actually a lot of my work at the moment has been around healthy lifestyles, because that was another fallout of our COVID pandemic, was sure people were sleeping, their sleeping and eating and everything went completely haywire. So that again is it's a great opportunity to be able to help people, because that also helps with anxiety. If we can sleep better, if we can eat better, if we can have good routines. So with anxiety, we very much in NLN, in a very supportive way, we're pushing our students. That's what we're doing. We're constantly, sure, they're often giving out to me saying, "God, Jane, you're going to push me out of my comfort zone again, aren't you?" And unfortunately, the answer is yes, because with anxiety, it has to go up to come down. So if you're at a 5, say you're at a 0 to 10 is your anxiety scale, and somebody's at a fairly constant 5. Now that's a really uncomfortable place to be. You're fairly anxious then most of the time. To get down to a 2 or a 3, you actually have to go up to an 8 or a 9. So what I mean by that is it would be like the person, we would say to the student, okay, you know, you really want to go into the shop on your own, but you can't do it. So it would be about, we're going to set you that goal. We'll help you with that. You're going to go up, you'll be going into the shop, you'll be feeling really panicky. So the anxiety is rising, and it is rising. Absolutely. It's no longer a 5. It's probably an 8, but it's that when you come out of the shop, it comes down, because I suppose what the person has realized then, well, actually the world didn't fall apart. I didn't do anything horrendous, and I survived it. So that is unfortunate. It's the only way for anxiety. You have to push through it and use it in order for it to reduce. So we do a lot of that in National Learning Network. So we provide that safe space. So in treating anxiety, the environment must be as stress-free as possible. So that's what we do as much as we can. And I'm going to let Amanda talk a lot more about that in terms of what is it that we offer, in comparison to, because a lot of our students will come from very negative educational experiences because it just wasn't for them and it has been quite traumatic. But we make the environment as stress-free as we can. But then you also, alongside that, you need to be building the person up. And that's what the multidisciplinary teams do. Often I'm signposting students as well. In other words, I would refer students out. Some students will need like more specific counselling or more focused therapeutic services. So that's what I would do a lot. And that's also obviously then helping with their anxiety. I'm going to finish with 3 examples of students. I thought that might be helpful, and it might be, I suppose it might bring things. I've talked about the theory there and what we do, but this, I suppose, brings it to life a little bit. Now, it's a great thing to be able to say. I could have picked so many students because we have a lot of positive stories. But I've gone with these 3. So just very briefly, this one particular young lady, she is maybe 20, she's nearly 21, I believe. She was in mainstream school, very bright girl. Pre-COVID began to struggle. Her anxiety was kicking in. Of course, COVID happened, and then that she stopped going to school. And she withdrew, and when she was due to go back to school, she couldn't. She came in to meet me. I remember it so clearly. She couldn't make eye contact with me at all. She couldn't speak to me. Her mum was with her, so her mum came into the meeting. Her mum spoke for her. She agreed to give it a go. So that was what we agreed. She knew she needed something, but the fear was so high. So she started slowly. And that's what we have, I suppose. Again, it's a fantastic opportunity within NLN to be able to, we can allow the person to start slowly, start gradually. She came in, maybe it was for, I think, 2 hours, 2 mornings a week. And then her plan was she was building up to her 5 days, which she did manage to do. What I suppose really was successful for her was her instructor within a few weeks was able to see she was very creative, and that was where her passion was, and that was where she felt good. So because we organize, I suppose, how you'd call them, person-centered bespoke training programs, really going on what the student wants, he enabled her to be able to you've set up opportunities for her to use that creativity. So she was baking, she was painting, she was making candles. She has since organized craft fairs, charity events. She is, she's talking out in class, and she is going to finish that course very soon, and she's moving on to a level 5. So it's absolutely fantastic, and she actually is happy. I suppose that's why I should have. That's the biggest outcome. So that's her. Another lady, she had come to us referred by her psychiatrist. She had been in a very traumatic workplace, where there was a lot of trauma, a lot of bullying. It affected her mental health to a huge extent. She deteriorated to the point where really she wasn't functioning. There was anxiety, depression. She had quite a few hospital admissions. And then her psychiatrist had said, while they were trying to make, I suppose, a recovery plan for her, what about National Learning Network? She equally started in terrified. She was absolutely terrified. I remember meeting her on the first day, but she pushed herself. She's a very determined lady. And she began to build that confidence. And what she found was that she had a real desire and a real passion to help others. And she has since gone on she finished that course. That was a 2-year course with us. She completed the trainer course, and she is now an instructor with us in National Learning Network. So she's come full circle, and she's one of the most inspiring people I know anyway, and I'm a huge admiration of her. So that was her journey. And then finally, a young man this time, he is 19 at the moment. He was attending mainstream school. Difficulties were picked up. There were concerns by his teachers and his parents, so they organised an assessment, and his assessment diagnosed him as autistic. The school, mainstream school, did their absolute best to put whatever supports in place were needed. Fortunately, COVID also coincided with this, and he couldn't go back after COVID. It just was too hard for him. He was attending child and adolescent mental health services, and they then thought somewhere like National Learning Network. Everybody does a sample before they start with us. So before he even became a student on our course, for his sample period, he spent the first week, and in fact, actually, I think it was 2 weeks, sitting in the car park. So his mum was able to get him to leave the house, but he couldn't get out of the car. So I suppose it became quite apparent that he and I needed to do quite a bit of work on then just what supports he needed, what strategies he needed to develop in order to get from the car to even through the front door and to up the stairs to his classroom. And he did do it, because again, another determined, bright young man who wanted something different for himself and didn't want to be at home in his bedroom all the time. So he is at the moment doing his full-time course. He has found he's very much a practical and classroom person. So again, he's out in the garden, he's doing horticulture. That was directed by him. That's what that he set his goals, and that's what, again, thankfully, with our flexible learning systems and our UDL, we can enable and we can facilitate that for somebody. And he's now become clear that in his career goals, which is great too, he's going to apply for animal care. So they're just 3 examples, and that is me finished. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of information, as I said to Edel, it's going to be hard for me to condense this into a short period of time because it's such a big topic. So I hope I haven't bombarded you. I hope it's been worthwhile. And I really do, though, I really, really want you to hear, because I'm a passionate believer in recovery. I want you to hear that no matter how worried you are about somebody or how worried you are about yourself, there are ways to combat social anxiety, and NLN is absolutely somewhere that will help you or your young person to get on that journey, to get on their journey, to be able to have a good and happy life. Really appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. That was really, really helpful.
Welcome.
And again, we have a Q&A thing down the side there of your screen if anyone has any questions, or you can go to info@lnn.ie. So we'll just move quickly on to our to Ciara Glynn, the peer support worker with the HSC, who was formerly at LNN in Maynooth, and she's just going to talk through a little bit about her experiences and how she's got to where she has today. Thanks, Ciara.
That's great, Edel. Thanks for that. I'm just changing the view for myself. Sorry about that. Yeah. So my name is Ciara Glynn. I am a peer support worker in the HSC, but I'm also a former student of the National Learning Network. So I think I'll just put the elephant in the room out there and say that this is really anxiety provoking for me. But I am passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about recovery, and I'm also passionate about supporting people through their difficulties by sharing my story. So I've got to the point with my social anxiety where all this passion that I have for these things has magically like overridden all this horrible stuff that I feel. And as I was listening to Jane there, with a great presentation, a lovely overview. I mean, it's hard to kind of put it into a nutshell. And when I was listening to her say about the anxiety coming up and coming down, that's all my experience always with public speaking. I really like public speaking. I do some lecturing in universities on recovery and peer support. And I have a meltdown before it. So this is just normal for me. But then when I start talking, it comes down miraculously, thank God. And by the end of it, I feel that massive relief and achievement that I did this. So I might stutter sometimes. I might look a bit fidgety, but I am okay. I want to be here. No one put a gun to my head to be here. It was my choice. Yeah, I think I'll start talking about. I never really prepare for this in slides. I really like to just talk from the heart and off the cuff. I know that's really terrifying for people, and God, I'm sure there's people on the call with social anxiety, and you're thinking, Jesus, like how are you doing that without preparing? But in a way, the preparation would stress me out even more. So I find if I just rock up and talk, it usually goes okay. So it's gone okay so many times now that I've retrained my brain in those anxious moments to say, yeah, it will be a bit uncomfortable, but you know what, it'll be okay, and hopefully I'll do an okay job. So yeah, I am a peer support worker, so it's relatively a new role in the HSE. So I'm employed to use my own experience of mental health and recovery to support people. So I work on a community mental health team in North Dublin. So what that means is if you have any kind of difficult mental health challenge and it becomes a bit overwhelming, typically people go to their GP, and when you go to your GP, you can be referred to a secondary service, a specialist mental health service, and that's where I work. So I work on a team with psychologists, employment specialists, social workers, occupational therapists, nurse, and psychiatrists, and that's called a multidisciplinary team. And all of us together with all of our expertise are like helping people in their recovery and bringing those different ideas to support someone with their care. So I'm doing that job about 7 years now. It'll be 7 years actually in February, and I say it's relatively new because there's not many of us in Ireland. The goal and the dream, and it's in line with mental health policy, is that there will be a peer support worker on every mental health team in Ireland. So I'm employed to support people that attend, but I'm also employed to bring a different perspective to the team. So I advocate for people who use the services. If there's things about service delivery that they're unhappy with, I will be that voice and I'll bring that to the team. I also have my own experience of services, so I'm bringing that. And then obviously my experience of living with mental health and the recovery from that. So the work that I do overlaps maybe with a lot of other people in mental health. I provide a therapeutic space. I run groups. I visit people at home. I go out in the community. I've been to the cinema, seen swimming, everything. I actually love my job. It's great. And it's the difference maybe with my role and maybe someone else that's doing that, whether it's a nurse or occupational therapist, is the conversation. So I am constantly using my lived experience with that person to form this connection. And in that connection, hopefully, like fostering hope there that they too can recover as I have. And when I use the word recover, I mean, for me, it's recovery because it's a constant ongoing thing. And I know that sounds scary if you're really in the depths of this darkness at the moment with your social anxiety. But for me, recovery is being okay with the anxiety and feeling it, but it not like stopping everything that I do in life like it used to. So where did it come from? I mean, Jane touched on it there, and I really believe the environmental, the nurture part on that, and I feel that I could do a whole another 2 day seminar just on that alone of all my experience that I feel led to that. But I really feel it was a lot of things at different points in my life and very significant points in my life that like helped me form this in my 20s. I grew up in a very poverty-stricken community and house in the 80s, a working class area, a working class family, and there was a lot of dysfunction in the home and in the community and also in school. And I, every year that I'm getting older, I kind of think of things that flash into my head and I say, oh God, there's another thing. That's why I have social anxiety. And I see it as all these little building blocks of things that gathered over time and resulted in me developing this. So when I was young, I was really confident. I was bubbly, probably a bit annoying to that extent. I always wanted to talk and talk to everyone and all that kind of stuff. And I think as I got older, then that was part of my identity. So when that was taken from me through social anxiety, kind of questioned who am I without that, and how I really started to it really affect my life, and I had to step back was in my 20s. So I really think I had some form of it all my life. But like many people in my teenage years, I tried to escape that with alcohol and drugs and kind of suppress all that childhood trauma and all my experiences. And obviously, going down that route was probably not the wisest or most healthiest for our mental health. But at that time, it really served a purpose because I didn't feel I had, maybe the tools to look at myself or to look at what happened because I was so young. But like anything with that, you can only really suppress that for so long. And when I was in my 20s, like 19 or 20, I started to really, really feel the effects of social anxiety. And how that presented to me first was that I started avoiding people. And if you were born after 93, you probably don't know that mobile phones, we used to ring people on them. And when they first came out, that was the thing. Everyone rang. It was so exciting to be able to walk down the street with this phone in your hand. There was no apps, there was no smartphones. So when the phone would ring, it would be a really close friend. And I'd just get this fear. And I'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to talk to them. And I didn't know why I didn't want to talk to them or where this was coming from. I just thought all I knew was I wasn't answering that phone. And the more and more I kept not answering that phone and avoiding that, the more I just started to avoid everything. Now, to the outside world and to other people, it looked like I was functioning really well. I used to DJ, I used to play in a lot of places, probably looked very confident, but it did take a lot of alcohol to even get me to go to those places to engage in those things. So I managed to hide that for about 3 years. I was struggling, everything was falling apart, I was avoiding things bit by bit. And it came to a point where, like, I contemplated, taking my own life. And I got to this point where I was thinking, I'm either going to tell someone or, suicide is an option for me. And I would have been 24 at that time. And that was a real low point in my recovery. And I always think there was many hard years, but the hardest years ever were the years that I didn't tell anyone, the years that I was, hiding it, masking it. I can remember going into work and having panic attacks in the toilet and, walking out and being so afraid. And in a way, it's good in 2023 that like anxiety is everywhere. It's in media, there's so many sports stars, celebrities maybe that we admire and we look up to, and everyone's saying, hey, I have mental health. But even back then, not many people spoke about it, and there was such stigma. I know that still exists, but even more so back then. So I really avoided telling anyone for so long, and they were the darkest years. And when I finally told someone, I got referred to the mental health services. So I was put on medication, I was put on waiting lists, and I attended for about 3 years. And I found that I was trying hard, but maybe my needs kind of weren't being met there because it was medication and waiting lists, and I kind of needed some support that was maybe sooner than that. So I did like a lot of people do and did a lot of trial and error. Googled, no, I couldn't Google back then, searched everything and looked for everything that would help me. And this is when I discovered the National Learn Network. At that point, I'd been out of work for a long time. I'd been on disability benefit. I'd been living at home in my parents, and I couldn't really leave the house much. Again, I could go out for something, but it would take a lot of alcohol. So again, people thought, Kira's grand, everything's fine with her. And I hid that part of my life for a long time, only telling, a few friends about that, a few close friends really. So when I went to the National Learning Network, before that I tried many times to get back into the world. I tried different jobs. I said, okay, I'm not going to do the DJing or I'm not going to do hairdressing. That's what I used to do. And believe it or not, I used to be a flight attendant. Like these are all horrifying jobs for anyone with social anxiety. So I had to kind of rethink, who am I? I can't do all this stuff anymore. So what will I work at? So I tried different kind of jobs that I felt like least human contact. Pizza delivery, did that for years. Grand, give them their pizza, leg it, no conversation. But even that was challenging, those few minutes. And this is what we do with social anxiety. We get very strategic about how we can manage it and hide it. And we pick things naturally that are less discomforting for us. So I did that for years, and I'd start in a job, things would go grand, be hiding it for a while, and then bam, it'd get too much. I can't go in there again. And I'd quit or I'd leave, or I won't even tell them I'm leaving. They'd never see me again. And this was kind of a cycle, and it's a cycle that a lot of people do with mental health. And then I got told about the National Learn Network. And that is when everything kind of changed for me, because I went in and I can remember my first day so clear, because I thought, I'm not going in there. I'm not bloody going in. I can't do this. It's too overwhelming. You know, I have to sit around with people. Are you kidding me? Like, I hate people. That's how bad it was. So I finally went in, and when I went in, I really couldn't talk to anyone. I was super nervous. I was shaking. I was staring at my screen saying, don't talk to me, anybody. I know all this is really hard to believe because I'm really chatting now, but this was how bad it was. And little by little, like, I started to look around, and other people were talking about their mental health or sharing their journey. And what I liked about the National Learn Network is it's a continuous intake. And maybe the girls can correct me if I'm wrong on that later. But at the time that I did it, people were starting at different times. So the good thing about that was I saw people that were leaving when I was starting, and they were in my group, and they were moving on to other things. So there was a massive hope piece in that. Okay, well, they're starting work and they've finished this course and they're going out in the world again. You know, maybe I could do that too someday. Also, meeting other people with mental health, it was like informal peer support. My role is very formal in peer support, but this was like peer support on an informal level, because I was sitting beside people who experienced panic attacks. They knew exactly what it was like. Like, I thought I was the only person on the planet that had all this stuff going on. And then when I sat beside a few people and I thought, hey, like, they're sound, they're nice, they're cool to be around, like, they're creative, they're smart, they're intelligent, all this stuff. And it was just kind of turning point where I thought, you know, oh well, if they can be all those things, well, maybe people can see those things in me. And it was a real shift in that. And look, I was terrified going in all the time, but it got easier. It did get easier, and the support of the staff was unbelievable. Fiona, my instructor, was so amazing, amazing, just such an incredible person. And she'd give us little activities, and I'd be like, "There's no bloody way I'm doing that. There's no way I'm doing that." And you know, I'd have this battle of not doing it, and then you'd see other people doing it, and you go, "Okay, I might do that. I might try that." And it could be speaking out about something for 2 seconds or 2 minutes, which was terrifying. Again, I've been rambling on for 15 minutes. You probably don't believe me, but that was the me then, the old Kara. So all that stuff I didn't even recognize at the time, that that was all just building my self-worth and my self-confidence again. And at the end of my course, I started to look for different jobs and stuff. And it all happened just nicely. It was over 18 months, perfect time. There was no pressure, or you know, I felt massive pressure on myself when I was at home. Oh God, like, you're not working. You know, you have to contribute to society. You're nothing if you don't have a job and you're getting up for work every day. And in the National Learning Network, I never felt like that. I felt like, you know, you're struggling. You know, it'll take time. We're going to give you the time, and we're not going to put any pressure on you to, get there when you're ready to get there. And even that was a shift, because I started to look at myself really different and my whole mental health. So at the end of that, I got a job as an instructor in the NLN, and I loved it. And even all the other staff in the other centre I was in, and NACE, they helped me. They knew my story. You know, they were really encouraging. I learned a lot of things from them. And then I did a few different little jobs in mental health before the peer support role come up in the HSE. Um, so I really contribute the National Learning Network to my recovery journey, but it's not the only thing that helped, but it definitely shifted the way I viewed myself and the way I viewed mental health, because I really think mental health is a really normal human thing, but not everyone has to access services. It doesn't get to that point where it's so overwhelming that, living stops and life stops, which happened for me and happened for many. So I know the statistic is 1 in 4 have mental health, but I think it's 1 in 1, really. And I think everybody, like, oh, sorry, 4 and 4, 1 in 1, whichever that is. Maybe they're both right. But that whole thing, I think, we all struggle at some level or another, and it is part of our whole journey. And for me, it's accepting that I have mental health, but I can still do things. And I'll finish on a quote that really, really helped me, and it's by Carl Rogers. He's a psychologist, and he says that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then things can change. He probably says that in a more poetic way than me, but the gist of that is, I accept my life happened. I had no control over that. All those things built up to me being socially anxious. And like, where's the shame in that? There's no shame in that. That's just the way my life went. So I hope people got something from that. I could talk about this for hours, but magically that flew in, and not surprisingly, my anxiety is gone. So thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Kira. That was really powerful. I think everybody listening online is going to feel the same way, and that there's nothing like actually having the person experience to talk about it to bring it home. And I think it was Maynooth at NLN you were in at the time, wasn't it? Yeah. So I think it's important to say as well, at the start, we didn't mention that we are also in a lot of further education colleges in the CDETB and to students in Maynooth University and Technological University Dublin, NCAD, the Institute of Art and Design Technology, and University College Cork. So students in third level as well can access our services there. I should have mentioned that for our colleagues who work in the third level and further education colleges. So finally, and not without least, we'll move on quickly. We're running a bit over time. Sorry now, people, but so we'll have Amanda Gretsch, who's our student recruitment officer, and Amanda's going to talk about, so if you do have somebody come on and they have social anxiety or related mental health, how do you get them to actually sign up and attend, and what ways we work around that? So thanks a million, Amanda, and thank you again, Kira, for that powerful testimony. You unmute.
Thanks, Adele. I just want to commend Kira for that powerful speech. I don't know really how I'm going to follow that, but I was thinking as you were talking, you know, the common thread is the resiliency that you showed through all of that, and a help by speaking about your lived experience. So thank you. So I'm Amanda. I am student recruitment for Roslin College and predominantly in the Dublin area. I've worked for National Learning Network for over 20 years. So the first 10, 15, I was an instructor, and in the last remainder, I'm student recruitment. So what is my role? So my role is, as Jane had said at the start, is we meet a person where they're at. So when somebody is interested in doing one of our courses, they would reach out either by sending an email or making a phone call, or even as we're talking of social anxiety, very often I might get a text because somebody doesn't want to speak to me on the phone. So as soon as you were interested in participating in a course, you would probably, I would be in contact with you. And then it's my role to give you as much information about making an informed decision on what course it is you would like to do. And by no means am I the expert on you, but I'm supposed to be the expert on the courses. And so I would listen, and what the next step would be that you could either come to a virtual information session with me. So that's when you would meet me on Teams. You could come to a physical information session. And what we're doing is we're exploring your interests. I'm looking at as Jane mentioned, the whole person, because National Learning Network aren't just looking at your vocational gains. We're looking at the whole health and social gains. So for instance, somebody with social anxiety, I can think of a student where, in fact, I would have met her at the door. So instead of her coming into the centre, I would have met her at the door and we would have just had a conversation about her interest. So what I also was thinking when listening to Jane and Kira is currently there's a lot of cranes in the air. There's a lot of building going on, and I would see National Learning Network as the scaffolding for the person interested. We're there to support you in whatever choices or decisions you want to make about your vocational journey with us. So I might just go on and tell you a little bit more about National Learning Network. So our student profile is usually from 16 to 65, so anybody within that age group. Eligibility criteria is under the umbrella of disability or medical condition, so that could be physical learning, sensory, mental health. And we have different courses that probably would be more suited to school leavers. We also have young adults or older adults that have just had a recent diagnosis, and people that have had a setback. So that could be they fell out of work and they need a little bit more support in building their confidence and self-esteem. And I suppose that was a thread as well running through the conversation. You know, once you build your confidence and self-esteem with coming to National Learning Network, each step will become easier as you go through them, and they are bite-sized steps. Or somebody that has had an illness or injury and can't go and do the job that they were doing, so they need to be retrained. So you're coming to us to upskill, to learn new skills, or to reskill. Maybe you worked in a physical job and you don't want to do that anymore, or due to illness or injury you can't, and you want to be trained in another area. So that's our student profile. National Learning Network, I should say, is right across Ireland. It's in every county. So wherever you are in the country, there will be a centre near you. We have over 70 sites. Some of them are centres, some of them are hubs or satellite centres. Myself, I represent Roslin College, and we have 5 campuses in Dublin that come under National Learning Network. We have a range of courses. So they're predominantly broken down into 2 areas. One would be vocational training, and they're either 18 months or 2-year courses. You have introductory skills training within that if you're just dipping your toe for the first time, or more specific skills training. So for instance, horticulture, computer programming, business administration, lots of creative courses, performing arts, creative media, ArtLink. And then we also have a suite of HSE wellness recovery courses. So that's for instead of gaining a full award, you're actually gaining strategies around managing your mental health, the toolbox the lady spoke of. So it's an invisible toolbox, so that when you become unwell, you can use those tools within the toolbox. Okay, so the initial, so I just want to say, for somebody with social anxiety to reach out, that really is when you have done 80% of the job, because you've reached out, and that is brave, and we don't take that as a small feat by any means, because that's your first step. You've put your hand up, or you've reached out and said you're interested in doing something, and that's when we will support you in making that decision. So as I said, you may come to a virtual information session, you may want to have a chat over the phone, or indeed a key worker may be advocating on your behalf, somebody indeed like Ciara. And so whatever way the interest comes in, it is followed up straight away, and I would have a conversation and give you the forms that are needed to complete. Once the forms come in and you've narrowed down your interest, you may meet with Jane, and as Jane said, the rehabilitation psychologists, they're there to meet and to see what supports do you need to access our service. For instance, Jane said, you know, you might need a step-by-step introductory into coming. Some people, they may need assistance with, like I've spoken to people that when they're traveling, that maybe a week before they come into us, they might get on their bus and get on 1 stop and then get off and then get on 2 stops the next day. So as we've all said, I suppose we meet the person where they're at. After you meet with the psychologist and it's deemed that we are the most appropriate service for you, you come in to do something that's called a taster day. And that's really when you're dipping your toe in and saying, do I like this? Is this something I would like to do? And something that Ciara had said, it's also where you will meet friends, and you'll be in a group where you will get support because you're going to meet other people that you identify with. I think a great thing about something like today is that It's bringing us all together. You know, there is isolation with social anxiety, but here today, there's lots of people here that are having the same challenges or difficulties as you guys are having. And I just want to say, although the word multidisciplinary team is used, we see that we're all part of the disciplinary team, the staff, the students, we're all one team. So when you come in on the day, and yeah, you're trying out the course, you're seeing, is it something you'd like to do? You'll do some of the work, and then if you would like to join up, then we will offer you a start date at a date that suits you or a date when there's a place available. So what makes us very different? I should say that all the awards we give right across National Learning Network can be achieved in mainstream. You could go to your local PLC college and get, for instance, a computer programming and game design award at level 5. But what makes National Learning Network very different is the way we do it. So the way we deliver our training is really very different from anybody else. And I'm just going to go through the points that make us very different. In school or in classrooms, you'll probably have a ratio of 26 students. With National Learning Network, the ratio is, depending on the course, it's either 10 to 1 or 12 to 1. So for every 10 students, you have a full-time instructor on our HSE courses and our introductory skills training. And for specific skills, it's 12 to 1. So that means you're within a smaller group working and more one-to-one time with the instructor. So it's a manageable, smaller group. And what's brilliant about it is that you learn at your own pace. You may be used to working or being in school where you have to keep up with a group, which is quite evident when somebody is struggling or when somebody is powering along. But with National Learning Network, you're learning at your pace. So there's 8 modules, whatever course you do. And if you want to break that up and do 4 one year and 4 the next, that's perfectly fine. If you wanted, let's say you have an assessment coming up and you need to change that date, again, that's fine, because we offer full flexibility around succeeding to achieve your full 8 modules. More time is given. So if you started again in mainstream, let's say you start in a course this September, you'll start in September and you'll finish in June. You'll all start together. But in National Learning Network, that isn't the way it works. You have more time. So you don't have from September to June, you have 2 years to do that course. And you can start with us on a day that suits you to start. Now, of course, somebody with social anxiety, and I've been on the call a few times with people like this, they might try and push out the date, but we will always be encouraging you to take that step, maybe to come in for a cup of tea, and maybe just to meet the instructor, you know, so it's a very gentle transition into the centre. Both Jane and Adele mentioned our multidisciplinary staff. So we have a huge cohort of people there to support you while you're with us. The focus really, we're not just looking at your vocational academic ability, we're looking at the whole person. We're looking, do you need some management or strategies around stress management, money management? Do I need support with housing? Is there, so all of those questions you have, we will assist you to answer them and put plans in place. And these plans are tailor-made specifically to you. They're called individual action plans. And what's really great about those is that every month after you've created a plan, you'll have a set of goals that you will create with your rehabilitation officer and your instructor, and we will review those goals every month with you. Because I think the great thing about goals is plans are made to be broken, so it's okay to change the goals, and that's perfectly fine. And so that makes us very different. If there's 12, 14 people in a class, each and every person has a specific plan just to suit them and their needs. I know Kira mentioned you can start at any time of the year. I always say other than Christmas Day, or, you know, you can really start any day that suits you to start any week. Registration is usually on a Monday, and yeah, that in that way, what makes that great is you're coming into a group that is already formed. You'll also have other people that have probably just started the week before. We've a great setup where we create a buddy up system. So you'll have a friend there that will, you know, show you where the toilets are, where they go for lunch, introduce you to staff. So it's a real like you're finding your tribe. It's a real tribe that you've found, and we're there to help and assist, and we all know what it's like to be nervous on our first day anywhere. Take time out if necessary. What this means, and it's very different to mainstream, is if you were in mainstream and due to becoming unwell or due to a personal circumstance, you needed to exit the course. What that would mean is you would exit the course, and then when you came back, you'd be playing catch up. Well, National Learning Network isn't like that. When you need to leave, you exit the course, and when you're in a place to re-enter, you come back and you simply pick up where you've left off. You haven't missed anything. You'll continue on with your course. You've got the support you need. We'll then further support you when you come back. And it's a smooth transition, and it's great flexibility for the student. So that makes us very different. I think that we might watch it's only a short little video about just some of the staff members that we have that make up our multidisciplinary team across National Learning Network. I don't know if there's music playing, but these are some of our instructors that you're seeing, and some of our courses also being shown. That was our sign language interpreter. So we have a suite of a lot of them in Roslyn for the deaf community. Just at the end there, it showed if you have a specific interest in Roslyn College and the 5 campuses, and I'll just tell you what they are. They're Griffith College in Wolftone Street, also Griffith College in South Circular Road. Our Stillorgan site in Dublin. We have TUD Technical University Dublin, where we have computer systems and networks. And we have Bull Alley Street, where our performing arts course is, and South Circular Road. Did I say that? 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
I
great.
think
And
that's it.
sorry about the audio thing there, Amanda. There's always an issue with that with Teams. And thank you so much. I think that was really, really helpful as well, and really was the icing on the cake as to how you take it to the next step. So we've run well over time, which isn't a big deal, but because of that, we have a few questions there that we're going to respond to everybody by email. And I think particularly Jane would like some time to work on a few of those so she can give you a proper comprehensive answer, because some really good questions there. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining today. I know it was a little long, but I think it was really, really helpful. And particular thanks to all of our presenters who gave their time and attention today. And we will be doing more of these in the future. Don't forget, you can email us at info@lnn.ie with any questions at all, and we'll put you in touch with the local relevant centre in your community. We're in every community in Ireland. So just want to say thanks again to everyone and say goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.